Hey, Bible nerds! Welcome back to another study. This week, we're stepping into the incredible story of Queen Esther. Now, this book is a little different, um, or the Book of Esther. It never actually mentions God by name, yeah, but his presence is woven through every detail, from the rise of an orphan girl to the fall of a prideful enemy. Esther's story is packed with courage, risk, providence, and some major plot twists. So, in this part one, we're going to walk through the story of Esther from the beginning to the end, um, just to set the stage or to get you familiarized with the story if you're not aware of the story of Queen Esther, or just a refresher, if you haven't read it in a while. And then the part two is going to be, it's going to be a slow down, and we're going to do the verse by verse study so we can really dig into the lesson, do the lesson. So, so yeah, grab your Bible if you want to, or a notebook if you want to take some notes, and let's dive into the story of Queen Esther. All right, so the story begins in Persia under King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus, I think. I think that's how you say it. Ahasuerus? I'm butchering this big time. So he held a banquet to show off his wealth and power, and in a burst of pride, he called for his queen, Queen Vashti, to appear before the nobles. Vashti refused, which, embarrassed the king. In anger, he removed her from being queen, yeah, and began the search for a new one. So, among those, brought to the palace was a young Jewish woman named Esther. She was an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai, and though her heritage was hidden, she carried herself with grace and humility. And out of all the women, Esther found favor with the king. He placed um, he placed a royal crown on her head and made her queen. Meanwhile, Mordecai uncovered a plot against the king's life and reported it, saving the king without getting credit at the time. So he didn't get credit at all for that. It was only written in their wherever they wrote their historical archive. So around that same period, another figure rose to power. Haman. His name is Haman, a proud and power-hungry official. Don't you just like those kind of people? Anyways, Haman demanded everyone. He demanded everyone to bow to him, but Mordecai refused. So Haman was outraged, and he didn't just want Mordecai to be punished, he plotted to annihilate all the Jews in the empire. I don't know why people like that do things like this, even in, this day and age. Anyway, so with the king's approval, an edict went out, setting the date for the destruction. So when Mordecai heard the news, he tore his clothes in grief and urged Esther to plead with the king. At first, Esther hesitated. Approaching the king uninvited could cost her life. But Mordecai reminded her with the famous words, who knows? Wait. Forget it. Who knows, but that you have to come to your royal position for such a time as this. So Esther's courage, rose. She called for a fast. So she asked her people to fast for her, and then dressed in her royal robes. Then she approached the throne. So the king extended his golden scepter, sparing her life, and asked what she desired. Um, he even said, "I can give you half of, my everything, if you ask." That's the king even offered that, but instead of immediately revealing her request, Esther invited the king and Haman to two banquets. At the second banquet, she bravely exposed Haman's plot. So on the first one, he was just trying to observe how Haman is and how the king is and how they are together, pretty much. It's just observation. And then she invited them again on a second banquet, and then that is when she exposed Haman's plot. She said, "Grant me my life and spare my people." So the king, was enraged. He ordered Haman to be executed on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. The irony. But there was still the problem of the decree. So since Persian laws couldn't be revoked, a new decree was issued. Like even him, the king who issued that same decree, cannot revoke it. So a new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves. So they are able to defend themselves. So on the appointed day that they were to be, destroyed or killed or whatever, instead of being destroyed, the Jews overcame the enemies. And the Jews were led by Mordecai, actually. So anyway, so the tables turned completely. Mordecai was promoted to a high position, and the Jewish people celebrated with joy. This celebration became the festival of Purim, still remembered by Jews today, actually, as the time God delivered his people through Esther's courage and God's providence. And that's the story of Queen Esther. An ordinary Jewish woman placed in an extraordinary position. Get the theme here, kind of like Deborah, used by God to bring about deliverance for her people. And that is the story. Yeah, so don't forget to join me in part 2 so we can dive deep into our Bible study of Queen Esther. All right, see you next time.